says it's called a lecture prep. I need this on the side, and then I need lecture prep up. And while I'm talking right now, you can just keep that up. Okay. Having a bit of a issue right now with some AV, but as a Mississippi expat living in New York City, there's one thing I don't get very often, and it's something that I'm asking each of you to do to help me a little bit. First to start off, if you would just stand up if you're interested in being an entrepreneur, if you are an entrepreneur, or if you're interested in helping someone else become an entrepreneur. You have to just stand up. Okay. And now what I need for all of you to help me out here in New York. I don't get this very often. Could you please help me call the dogs? So if you could just say, go, dogs, go. Come on. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Go, dogs, go! Still got my, my ringers off. All right, one more time. Ready for this? Go, dogs, go! Thank you. Now, while you're still standing, if you could look to the person on one side of you, and while you're looking at that person, I want you to say, go, dogs, go. But with your eyes, while you're looking at them, I want your eyes to say, I believe in helping you make your dreams come true. And I believe in you. So I know it sounds, come on, it's a little woo-woo. We're going to do it. You're going to say, go, dogs, go. Go, dogs, go. Okay. So, thank you. So by doing that, what you're ensuring is that each of you have just given each other a contract that this entire class, that all of the alumni from this university, and that Mississippi State, all of us support each and every one of you in becoming an entrepreneur. And so that means that anytime you're at Scott Field and you hear go, dogs, go, you're going to have in your mind, oh, wait a minute. Mississippi State believes in me. I can make my dreams come true. It's very difficult when you're an entrepreneur because a lot of times it's like running a marathon, New York City 2001. You feel yourself hitting the pavement quite a bit. It's your own feet for 26.2 miles, hitting the pavement, and you're by yourself. And you have a lot of voices going on in your head. And while we need to learn these days that we don't have to please absolutely everybody, what we do need to know is that everyone at this university, across the world, graduates, faculty, and each of your classmates wants you to succeed. So please take that with you. And so even if you're in Barcelona, I did have a beautiful picture of Ronaldo. If you're in Madrid and you're watching Ronaldo at Real Madrid playing Arsenal, and you hear them scream, "Ir" in Spanish, you know that that's go, and you know that go means what? It means that each of you is important, and we care about each of you, and this university is supporting you. Got it? Okay, so go, dogs, go! Thanks. No, okay, that one's it. Thank you. All right, so thank you, Eric, for the kind introduction. I'm going to start off with my background with a, can we put it on slideshow? Yeah. Could you stay up here and help me? Thank you, Kyle. Going to have a helper. All right, so to start, I'm just going to start about the practice of architecture. Beautiful, beautiful screen. Awesome. Okay, so the practice of architecture, is there a clicker? No. All right, well, you can click through. All right, so the practice of architecture, you can click through while I do this pretty fast. You're going to graduate from high school. We'll stop it. Not right, stop it right, yeah, right there, stop right there. So you're going to graduate from high school, each of you have. You're going to get accepted into university, in my case, architecture school. You're going to design things. You're going to stay up late, although at lunch today we all talked about the need for going to sleep and for being organized. And disclaimer, I don't think staying up late is a necessary thing to approach to achieving success. You're going to design more things. You're going to graduate. You're going to interview, get a job, work on many projects, take your exam if you're an architect, pass the exam, become a member of professional organizations, run some projects, create architecture, go to a job site, become an associate, And your lifestyle will be a life that is wake up every morning, exercise, put on your shirt, eat breakfast, go to work, make a living, and create architecture, do some sketches, go home at 6 p.m., drink a martini, have dinner, read a book, and go to bed. So you'll probably get some of your projects published, you'll meet the right people, you'll become AIA, you'll become an associate partner, you'll have interview with clients, you'll sit on some local boards, and ultimately get a lot of awards and become FIA. So wow, as an architect, as a profession, as a metaphor, got a lot of work put out for you. This is a typical career for architects, and it's well embedded that this is the route that people go. However, it's the myth of the profession of architecture, and it's interesting that it finds its strength in the firm hierarchy and through moving up the ranks. It's amazing how a profession, and I did have this slide, but you'll have to look it up now, how a profession that can build buildings that are built out of air, so look at the Chinese Olympic Stadium, as well as buildings that can adapt to temperature shifts, sunshine shifts, and the users. It's interesting that even though we are so progressive as in what we create, we're still so mired in this hierarchy of how we work. And it's also interesting how this fashion and lifestyles currently in the US are also following this kind of 1950s Mad Men aesthetic. So, next slide. Oh yeah, here's the bubble building. Good, okay, got that one in. And another, okay, cool. Got some in. All right, so now we'll stay here, and you go to the next one. So now it's called off-roading. So now's when our lecture really starts. So that other was me trying to say, this is kind of what you expect when you're an architect, and this is the one that is the path that I chose. I chose to off-road. As a Mississippian, I'm very poetic. I think all of you probably are too, even if you're an expat from another state living here. I'm partial to junkyards, mud holes, quicksands, ditches of any sort, pine trees, orchestrated clouds of dirt that are kicked out from muddy tires, dusty gravel roads, red mud, and my favorite, the rust-colored cotton fields bursting with white fluff. So these images that we have, these things that make Mississippi so poignant to us, or where you're from so poignant to you, those are things that make us so much more of a rich person and have so much more of a personality that we get to put into who we are. Those things become more apparent when our path is not direct and when we can actually take a breath and realize that there's more to life that we have to live while we're on this blue marble. So I'm going to start next with showing 5 examples of, start with 5. Go ahead. Sorry, yeah. I'm going to show you 5 examples of off-roading by some colleagues of mine, moments when they went out on trajectories without a map. I'll show you 3 architecture firms that have charted new territory, and then I'll describe my own path, which has involved many different spurs and how it kind of comes together. So first I'll talk about the 5 individuals. The first one pushed her way up. My first colleague worked for Deborah Burke Architects, the current dean at Yale School of Architecture. She designed apartments for Calvin Klein's daughter, not a bad job. However, she wanted to change the world, or at least the world around her. So she quit her day job, and she went to work for the city of New York. As a senior design liaison at the Department of Design and Construction, she helped raise the bar for cultural works. She was instrumental in NYC's design guidelines, so that's like a set of standards that New York City has to build to. And her work is inclusive in creating inclusive buildings that are creative and create a fabric that's worthy of attracting millions of tourists a day from Bangladesh to Boise. So she's active in influencing and changing the shape of New York City every day. So she took something different. She decided instead of just this role of being an architect, she was going to go change and shape the entire city. The next one is Jumped. All right. This one is a friend who is an architect at a very busy firm. He was designing anthropology stores. I think y'all probably know Anthropologie as well as Urban Outfitters all across America and every American shopping mecca as well as the world. He laid out his plan to his boss that he wanted to join into his boss's firm, and his boss said yes. However, his boss wouldn't let him become a complete partner in the firm. So my friend took it upon himself to just really think about it, and he decided to start his own firm. He told his boss, and his boss understood. And while he was 1 month away from starting off on his own, he was so nervous. I mean, just the inside of his stomach was crazy. And it was 2 weeks before he started his own firm that he got a phone call from one of his past clients had recommended him to do a brand new store. And so he did, he did the Green Depot, the first green store in New York City, actually the first green commercial space in the nation that was with a green LEED rating, and he designed that store. So again, he just simply jumped. And by taking that leap of faith and by knowing he would, setting a date and doing it, he was able to achieve exactly what he wanted. He now has an incredibly successful design firm in New York. All right. My next one is a friend that drove. This one was actually, this one actually lived in the Cotton District many times, and he's a Mississippi State grad, and he wanted to work for a famous architect out in New Mexico. So he packed up his Jeep Cherokee, and he drove. And he drove, and he drove. And what is it? He went to Memphis and took a left. Is that I think, the way you do it? And then he drove and drove and drove. And he drove through the desert, and he showed up after 2 or 3 days of driving straight into the office of Antoine Predock and said, "Hi, I'm here to work for you." Well, Predock's office was like, "Great, this is nice that you're here, but we don't, what we really need is someone to clean the toilets." So this Mississippi State student, realizing, hey, there's a need, I'm here, he picked up a mop and he started cleaning toilets and being their utility person. So for an entire week, that's what he did, maybe even 2. And then after that, they slowly began to know him and said, "Hey, you know what? You could help us on a competition," which he did. And then he got a job working for Antoine Predock, quite a extremely successful firm in the U.S. One of Predock's projects. The next one is a friend who is really interesting as well. Like, all of them are interesting. This one is a friend who had a background in art history and from the University of Penn. And she found herself working in an architecture firm by showing them that she had good graphic design skills. So already she had stepped outside of her abilities of what her degree was, and she was able to prove her worth and why an architecture firm should hire her. She then moved to New York City, and she went to interview at a firm called Razorfish. Razorfish at the time was one of those firms that is at the penultimate of web design. And this is before we had web design as a computer program that we can easily make our own websites, which each of us has probably done. But if you think about to the time maybe when you had never designed a website, that's where my friend found herself. And she found herself wanting this firm to design websites. So how did she do it? She had to think about how she would present herself, and she decided to present herself as a website. So she actually, instead of handing in a paper copy of a resume, she actually took a big piece of brown paper, laid out in squares what a website would be that would describe herself, as well as her past experience. She rolled it up, went to the project, went to the designers at Razorfish, and actually got the job. Pretty incredible, just the fact that her degree in art history wasn't limiting her ideas about who she was or who she could be or what type of job she was destined to have in the end. She was able to see past her current skill set. The next one is rooting. And this was a colleague of mine that made a very difficult decision to move home. It's a very respectable one, but he committed himself to the choice he made. He buckled down and got to work, and at the same time got very involved in his community. He became an advocate for the things he believed in, such as the way that value and the value that art can bring to the life of a community, and the importance of art education. After a few years, he was asked to sit on some boards for different art and preservation organizations where he could tackle problems at the state level. And he just started making change in everything he did. Although his life was very full, sparing no free second, he took time to design a very special existence for his personal life by renovating old homes and even building furniture, as well as going to Italy and traveling as much as he could, and also painting and having art shows, and being in art shows. However, still in his professional life, he insisted on the importance of art in public space and would even add stained glass windows into fire stairs, transforming places that we normally think of as drab into places where somewhere you would want to spend time. Again, bringing beauty into the world of everyone around him. So from him, I learned the importance of being an artist in everything I do, and I hope that you can also take that kind of feeling and that passion of each of these people into how you move forward. So none of these people sent in cover letters or resumes. None of them waited idly by the phone for it to ring. It didn't matter the state of the economy. Each of these 5 people took action. So essentially, each of them had to take the wheel of the car and steer it, so to speak. There was no roadmap out there, and there's no roadmap for you laid out for you and your life. It's one you have to create yourself. Next one. Okay. Now I'm going to talk about 3 architecture firms. I'll start with talking about the Rural Studio. I don't know if you're familiar with it. The architects in the room probably are. It's located in Hale County, Alabama, and it's an extension of Auburn University. It was one of the first alternative architectural endeavors that I was aware of when I was in school, and it's a collection of faculty and students with the mission of bringing beauty into places of need. The studio locates itself directly in the center of Hale County, Alabama, which happens to be the poorest county in Alabama. And so how they move forward on their projects is by creating them. They talk to the residents. They locate places for design to play a role in the lives of the citizens. They define a project, write a program. They design solutions, and they discuss the project with all the community leaders they need to garner support to make it come true. They investigate creative materials, oftentimes reusing things that otherwise we would see as waste. And they then get their hands dirty and build the projects. By doing this, they take a group of creative people and they help them go beyond what they thought they could do. They engage the community to be creative and to raise the level of design and the collective consciousness of the entire town. And ultimately, they're redesigning the role of an architect. They're defining it themselves. Cool. The next one is Abroco, and it is a firm in New York City that shows the power of having the courage of their own convictions. So this firm started out as an architecture firm of 2 people, and they joined another 2-person branding firm, and they began to make projects. And after a while, they decided, like, what can we really do that will set a mark? And so they bought 1 apartment. And with that 1 apartment, they divided it into 2 apartments. You all know how we live in very small spaces in New York City. And they then made this small space each of the small apartments to have movable walls, and they equipped it with all the accoutrement of living in a very small space. They also had different vendors give them different products to be able to use and showcase in these apartments, and then they were able to sell them. So I think we've got a slide of the apartments. Next one? Oh, no. Keep going. This is why. Yeah, got it. Okay, there's the apartments. Let's see. So they didn't just sell the apartments, they sold a lifestyle. The bookshelves filled with design books. The wine racks were already filled with wine. And there was even 2 folding bicycles to make sure that the residents kept themselves fit. Next, they decided that their next venture, they were interested in making and designing restaurants. Well, one of them had a brother who was a chef at Le Cirque in London, and they gave him a call. And they decided to not wait for a client to build a restaurant, but to use themselves as a client. So they designed and opened a restaurant which won a James Beard Design Award the first year out, which for restaurants is huge. And they now have, they're now on like their 8th restaurant. So when you're in New York City, give me a shout, and we will find ourselves eating at one of them. Not only are they in New York, they're actually now opening restaurants in Napa Valley. Another one of the restaurants, cool. All right. No, keep going. Oh, now we got to go to my firm. Can you go to, how are we going to do this? Yeah, if you just go to the one that says Strata. Oh. Huh. All right. I'm just going to start, and maybe we'll just slowly flip through those as I go through it. Thank you so much, Kyle. All right. So Strata is the firm that I co-founded with my business partner. He and I were students together at Yale Graduate School. We named our firm Strata because strata is the word that defines the layers of the earth. All the striations of all the different parts of land coming together, if you've seen photos of it from the desert, all of that is the strata of the earth. And when you build a building, you're actually building on that foundation. So you want something very strong. So you want strong strata to be able to build your high-rise. We, however, take it a little bit further, and we think of strata as the strata of human voices coming together to make a building happen. We all know how difficult it is to make a business or how difficult it is to make decisions. Building buildings are trying to bring in the harmony and the chorus and the entire composition and orchestra together to build one single piece of architecture or one single space. Let's see. So we find constraints as generative tools. When a neighborhood in Istanbul was suffering from a number of earthquakes and had a lot of people living in houses that weren't equipped for the earthquake, to be able to handle the earthquake, we were actually hired by a developer who was working with the city to design earthquake-resistant buildings, of which we built 7, or designed 7. One is under construction now. And we worked closely with an engineering firm to develop the system so that the building would not fall down and crash. So in that way, we were able to use a constraint on land that otherwise wouldn't be possible to build on, or even if it was, otherwise, if things crumbled, there wouldn't be ways for ambulances to get there. And we developed these buildings. They may show up in a minute. They might not. We'll see. Let's see. Another project in Azerbaijan, we were asked by a client to look at some empty land on the Caspian Sea. And so when you looked at the land, it was essentially like you could see the sea very far away, but there was absolutely nothing. And Azerbaijan sits in the Caspian Sea and has the potential to be a hub for all of the surrounding countries. Taking that into understanding, we developed 2 different schemes for our client and developed a giant beacon, which you might see in a little while. But essentially, it's a building that does this and looks like a lighthouse, and out of the top of it is a bright streaming light. So it's a beacon, and it also serves as a lighthouse for people that are coming into this port area. We then went ahead and helped the client understand how to circulate that information and that all those goods from that port throughout the countryside using train lines to other parts of the world. That was a really interesting project because we designed 2 different schemes for it for a client, not knowing that it was actually a competition project. And the president of Azerbaijan chose our project because he felt that it was the most inspiring and the best one to be able to represent Azerbaijan. So it was very humbling to be able to think about how things we do and marks we make in life have a lasting presence to be able to change communities. All right, we're just flying. When Met Oval Soccer School needed locker rooms, we worked with them to develop a business plan for their building, where in the off hours it could be used by the NYCFC and the David Villa Foundation. David Villa is now playing for NYCFC. Essentially, let's see. Still on that one. So essentially, we worked with them to be able to develop a project, and we just got word yesterday on my layover in Atlanta that the project is moving forward. And so that's, again, one of those places where a youth soccer school is going to be able to generate money for an entire community and be able to bring in people from all over the world to be able to study soccer in New York City and be able to train with very elite soccer players and make something for the community. Well, now we're right at this project. Perfect, they're right there. This is a project we recently finished. I told the story earlier of how we got the project, but this is the Wolfgang Puck restaurant at the Four Seasons Hotel in downtown New York City. The developer of the project is Larry Silverstein. He's the developer that developed all of the World Trade Center site after 9/11. He actually owned the World Trade Center buildings when they collapsed. He had just bought them 6 months earlier. And he decided that for all of the new office space that he was building there, he needed a 5- or 6-star luxury hotel. And the hotel ended up being was pegged to be built by Robert A.M. Stern, who was the dean at Yale when I was a student there, as well as my business partner. And the project went on hold in 2008, right as there was a crash. And because they had figured out how to balance, those of you, well, y'all are all thinking about being entrepreneurs, think about this. They had no debt on the land. And so they talked to their investors, and they were able to ask their investors to hold on the land without selling it and be able to let it sit as an empty site for 4 years until they were able to start back into construction mode. So it's pretty amazing. So the design was designed by Robert A.M. Stern. However, when they came back to the idea of having the signature restaurant, they brought on Wolfgang Puck. Well, Wolfgang Puck's team wanted a completely different version of their idea for a restaurant than the previous signature restaurateur. And so that's when we were hired by Silverstein to work alongside the visionary decorator Jacques Garcia from Paris. And so it was one of those incredible projects where there were many times we had a lot of constraints in our way. There were a lot of, the building had already been built, and there were a lot of us pushing against the wall to make something happen. So we did quite a bit of R&D to solve problems and to make the building come in on budget and on time, number one key. So it was one of those really fun exploratory things where you're questioning a product and you're questioning a client, a product, and an idea, and you're pushing the manufacturers of materials to take their materials further than they've ever thought to take them before, because you have an idea of how that material can fit into a space and how they can use that to achieve something very special. And so we did that pretty much for every square millimeter of this project, including all the furniture, the floor, the beautiful glass wall, which you're not seeing, that's gilded with gold, which we actually had made by building a 3D model of drapery and sending that 3D model to Paris, where they then took the relief of that 3D model of the drapery, and then they cast in 2-foot segments in plaster these gorgeous drapes, because drapes at the top are tighter than they are at the bottom, so it had to have that shape. And then they sent those over from Paris and installed 6 of those draperies inside the private dining room. So when you're in New York you will give me a call, and I will be happy to show you those. I think there's one more photo. These photos just show the bar, which has a bookshelf and quite a lot of hijinks to be able to get incredible sound quality and acoustics using a Linder ceiling from Germany. And then, again, quite a bit of hijinks to be able to get the artwork that was specified for the project to be able to fit into the space and be lit correctly. So quite a bit of fun. Okay. I'll flip. Oh, you can flip. This is a theater. We love designing theaters. This one we worked on with Avroco in Las Vegas. Cool. And I can get a patch experience. This is perfect. Okay. Other restaurant projects I've worked on. I'm flipping through the back while I talk about these. Actually, you know what? Actually, if you go back to that other presentation, it has it ready. Thank you. Okay, so now we'll start here. So now you saw that the line of arrows could have gone all the way up in my life, and I got pretty far, and I did win some AIA awards with some of the teams that I worked with on some of the projects that I worked on. However, there became that moment where you just say, whoa, stop. There's more to life than this. And there were also 3 different topics that, I need to talk about them out of order, but that's all right, that are important in the way that I think about life and about space. And so we'll start with adaptability first. It's going to take me a second to get there. All right. So when it became time for adaptive reuse, it's interesting the way that things you have done in your past come through and weave themselves through into your future. And so I think each of you will figure that out and find that. And the book by Franz Johansson called The Medici Effect talks about this a lot, as well as the fact that what he's really pinpointing in his book, he calls it the intersection. And what he's pinpointing in his book is a book that I hope each of you get, again, The Medici Effect. And it is where you realize that the Medici family, which was a banking family in Florence, actually founded the Renaissance by finding all of these craftspeople. They found architects. They are responsible for Michelangelo. They are responsible for funding Leonardo da Vinci. They are responsible for an inventor. They are responsible for funding artists. They are responsible for even funding the scientist Galileo. So the Medici family, unless you think that it's only about men, who I just mentioned, the women in the family had extremely high education, as well as they had quite a bit of independence. So for a family, it's a pretty incredible family that happened at that time. Why it's so important is that this family funded all of these creative thinkers at this time in the world, and each of them started to cross-pollinate their ideas with each other. Why that is so important to you right now is the fact that each of you just made a pact with everyone in the room that each of you is going to support each other on your next entrepreneurial venture. And the fact that each of us together and the most diverse group you can pull together usually come up with the most incredible ideas. Therefore, it's been pretty amazing how Franz Johansson has used his research in doing this to be able to spread out into the world and work with Pixar and Disney, Google, different places to be able to develop much more creative ideas, definitely at Nike, than would happen if it was just if it was a group of all people who had similar backgrounds. Okay, let's see. Where am I going to go with this? Okay. All right. Got out of order, so I'm a bit Bear with me, thank you. What's that? Thank you. Actually, I'll go with public space, although it's over here. But one of the most important parts about public space was research that I was doing in undergraduate on public space, and then when I came, and also in graduate school, putting on a course. So while in graduate school, another colleague and I felt like we weren't getting the correct education or a correct class on landscape that we wanted to have, Strata. We wanted to understand more about the way that site planning works and how that can affect the landscape that we work in, literally. And so he and I put together a class and started asking site-specific artists to come and teach us about architecture and how they see the built world. And by doing that, we then went to that same man who designed the building, Robert A.M. Stern, on his first week as being dean, and said, we've called all these artists, we would like to put on a class that does this. And he immediately went out and got funding, matching funding for us to be able to put this class on. So that's what's showing here, and it's just talking about the realm of the public realm and public space. That then started to explode even more when I was the director, let's go back one. When I was the director of the Small Town Center here at Mississippi State, where a student, an undergraduate like yourselves, Sigrid Osland, said, you know what, I think there should be a bus system in Starkville. And so she wrote to the Federal Transportation Authority and was able to get a bus grant for $100,000 that went through the Carl Small Town Center, where we researched how a bus could go through the city. The fascinating thing is, at the same time, she and I wrote a second grant on biking and walking throughout Starkville. We called it Bike Starkville and Walk 2. It's now called Starkville in Motion. And so it's fascinating that now each of you can ride a bus through the city of Starkville, and we now have bike paths, and Lynn Lane just built a brand new sidewalk. All of those were simple steps that all came out of one undergraduate having a vision on how to improve the life of Starkville, where all of you live. Pretty amazing. All right, now next one. The different groups that come together to make buildings, make planning happen. It's quite thorough. All right, next one. This has been, you can go fast through this one. These are building and a project that I did in New York City along the waterfront. It's 3 miles of a public park, also dealing with public space. And in places where, in New York, you're not allowed to build over water that hasn't been built over before. And so as a result, when we built a pier, we would build a pier and then we actually stacked it twice so that we would make twice as much public space to give back to the community. Because in New York, we need a lot of park space. And so that was one way that we went around the constraint and were able, by building it 2-storied, we're able to create park space for everyone. That's one of the views of the park. Let's see the next one. Okay. And then we also built all along the edge. Cool. Okay, let's go to placemaking. Super. Instead of, let's see where we go. Instead of placemaking as much, I was going to talk a little bit about, you can, whoa, stop right there. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Kyle. Instead of placemaking, I was going to talk a quick moment about health. So, and healthcare, and the way that buildings have a lot to do with health. When I was an undergraduate, my thesis project was to build a healthcare center. Then I went to work at a firm in New York City and found myself designing a biohealth medical center at University of Michigan. It won a number of AIA awards. After that, I worked on a project for a digital media company in Mountain View, California, where everyone in the entire building, it was for the executives, and they cared about the health of their employees. And if you think about it, the one thing that doesn't show up on a budget sheet or on a sheet for how much money you make in your firm is the most important asset of every firm, and that is your employees. And so by keeping your employees happy and healthy, what do? You actually lower your healthcare costs, and you also have employees that are more productive and stay at work more and take fewer days off. Seems pretty simple, right? Well, there are actual architectural ways to do this, one of which is designing lights that work with the circadian rhythms so that the lights are a certain color and temperature as the morning light over on the east, and then throughout the day they come around and the lights are more of a blue color in the afternoon. Another one is by allowing everyone in their office space to adjust their desks. You've probably heard of that one, as well as being able to adjust their temperature levels. So you're not just sitting. I used to find myself, when I worked in a corporate firm, sitting on my hands because the men in the firm would be wearing 3 different layers or 4 different layers of clothes, and the women in the firm had to sit on heating pads, and we couldn't wait until the end of the day when we could go outside and our nerves could actually relax just because we were so freezing from wearing sundresses because it was summer. Also, there are things just about seeing outside that can make people happy. So by building platforms in the center of office plates that are higher than the ones on the ends, allow people here to be able to see over the heads of those above them to see out to the actual outside. So by being able to see the landscape helps with biophilia. There was also an image, I'm not sure if you saw it, of a green wall, and I described this earlier today. We built a green wall system that was developed along with NASA to help clean the air. And what it is many of you have probably seen these gorgeous green walls. Well, oftentimes those green walls take quite a bit of water to be able to have upkeep. The one that we used from NASA recycled the water, so it actually used less than 1/10 of a gallon every month of new water. So it was just recycling and recleaning. What it was also doing was not only giving biophilia to the people working there by their eyes seeing this beautiful green wall, but it also slowly sucked the air through the wall. So the air is being sucked in through the rhizomes, which are the roots of the plant, and going back into the return air system of the building and going back into the recirculation system of the building. When that happens, typically buildings like the one we're in right now, 60% of this air is recirculated, 10 to 40% is fresh air from outside. In that building, they were taking air that had just been scrubbed, that was air in the building, and they were bringing it back and putting it back into the air system so that when you took a fluke counter, you could actually go outside and measure the air quality outside and then the air quality inside, and the air inside the building was cleaner and fresher than the air outside. Pretty amazing. That also brings us into that similar projects where we deal with the materiality of a building and every single material we use. So if you think about the glue that goes underneath the carpet, if you think about the backing that goes on a carpet, if you think about the fabric or the foam, styrofoam that goes underneath the chair, and if you're in a ceiling with an acoustical tile, even the mechanical attachments or the plastical attachments that attach to them have some sort of off-gassing or have some sort of attachment to the outside world. So our firm is very dedicated in researching ways that the interior environments of buildings can actually give off more health to the people inside them than other spaces. So not just sustainability and not cutting down a tree, but we're caring about the person who's inside the building, using it every day, feeling healthy and feeling energized. All right, hold on, let me think where I'm going with this one. I'm about to end it. That then takes me quickly then to a project, which I don't have images of, called the Peppa Train. So our firm is working with a train line out of South Africa that delivers health care to people throughout South Africa who would otherwise not have access to health care. after the apartheid, all of these small towns were disparate and separated from each other. They didn't have any access to high-end health care. However, what they did have, and what was left behind, were all of these fancy train lines that were well kept because it was the infrastructure to take diamonds out to the water. And so the Kruger family of the Kruger National Park has developed a train line called the Peppa Train that takes medical doctors and medical equipment on these train lines to address different cities for 2 weeks at a time. Our work with that train line is to help them develop two things. One of them is very simple, architectural, to understand how they can build a surgical train so that now they can give eye care and cataract surgery as well as other small surgeries to a population that would otherwise be blind at age 50. The second aspect of that is that on a personal note, we are helping them develop ways that additional things can happen with these trains. So we're holding a conference in April with Elon Musk as well as with Richard Branson to be able to talk to them about, obviously they're both quite interested in transportation, as well as Elon Musk now has his new solar panels. So we're looking at ways that we can help them develop generators that when the train line pulls in, those generators can have the solar panels so that when the trains aren't moving, they're powered by these solar paneled areas, as well as when the train moves away, those areas become entrepreneurial incubator spaces for the people in the community. Pretty cool. Okay, with that note, I'll wrap up. So, you can go to that one. All right, stay right there. Okay. Thank you for bearing with me. All right. So now I've described 5 different trajectories of people who haven't had maps and have made their own ways through the world to find success. I've shown you 3 architecture firms that are charting new territory, and I've shown you 1 native daughter's unexpected journey. And I hope as you see all of these paths that I take through locating ways with philanthropy, through locating ways of material research, through locating ways of working with oceans and seas, every single time I talk to a philanthropist, I think about, and this is my personal goal and I urge it to be yours, I think about how those ideas can then be applied to our own state of Mississippi and how this can become a wonderful toolkit and how Mississippi State can work with these researchers to develop so many more new things, and we can be such a center of and thought leaders for the entire world in making change. So, with that, I describe myself as someone who builds buildings. I describe myself as someone who builds relationships. I build communities, and I want to work with you to design a better world. So, what do you need to off-road? Hold it right there. Hold it. Hold. Stop. You'll know when it is. Okay. What do you need to off-road? Clearly, you need an SUV, one that has good gas mileage, or with the research being done at Mississippi State, it will be one that will have a wonderful electric battery on it. This SUV would have very good brakes, so you can stop, much like the wisdom that the colleague of mine that I described earlier was able to root down into his hometown and make a difference. Your SUV would have fog lights, like the colleague I described who couldn't see what was ahead of him, but once he turned on the fog lights and made a plan, his resources were there for him to move forward, and he had clients. Because of bumpy, unknown, unmapped roads, you'll need GPS technology. Much like my firm's use of technology, you'll need it to negotiate a situation. Like a GPS system can turn an unpaved road into the most direct route wherever you are in the world. You will want comfort. You're aware that there are bumps and that you are equipped with the right suspension, as in the case of my friend who designs design guidelines to give her support to her city. You'll want the best blend of travel companions. So just like everyone in here, you want to make sure that you've got the right conversationalists and the people with a good sense of humor. All these things already are with you. And I think all of you know that, or you wouldn't have been in this auditorium right now or in this entrepreneurial class. So essentially, think of yourself. You are the SUV. When you feel out of control and unsure of what's ahead, know that you're equipped with many skills to help you initiate action. You are in the driver's seat for your life. So just like the first time you learned to drive, you didn't need to get a license to begin driving. The key's in the ignition. Let me say that again. The key is in the ignition. The car, your car, you, is idling. Your seatbelt is on. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. I'm going to say go. All right. Questions? Yeah. The question is, what is my favorite project that I've ever worked on? And my answer to that is a very quick one. That is my next project. Sorry, that was easy. All right, next one. Yeah. So the question was, when I work with other countries and work in so many different places, Azerbaijan, Turkey, Brazil, Doha, Qatar, Shanghai, I built an entire city on Hongqiao, China. How do we deal with different communities and different cultures? I think that's the most exciting part about, again, being at Mississippi State, is that we are a university that has people from all over the place. We also are rural, and we have connections to everyone with what we have now called the internet. So through our working with other places and other cultures, I think the biggest thing is that we listen and we learn. So if we need to realize that a staircase needs to, in Korea, a staircase has to end on a 3, or is it? It cannot end in 3. So when you're designing a staircase in Seoul, you have to make sure that the number of treads doesn't end in 3, because people, every time as they walk, go love, money, death. Love, money, death. So there are cultural problems and differences with all of us. Each of us has these different constructs, and we have to just be respectful of them. And again, that's just kind of one of those ways that all of us needs to learn to use diversity as a way to move forward and to make change. That answer it? We do have satellite offices and people that we work with in Belarus, Istanbul, China, and Dubai, and California. Okay.
Did a student ask online that you seem to be as much of a logical thinker as you are creative. Do you find those sides conflict? And then how do you deal with that?
What a lovely question, Dad. Way to go. Mother, it's the joint of my two parents. Wow. How do they conflict or what?
How do they conflict? Do you find they conflict, and how do you deal with that?
Yes, they conflict. And I can say probably the way that you feel it the most, and I think each of you will feel this, is the moment that you start your own business, because you have to logically work through steps to make something come into fruition, because you are taking a ball of clay and then you're building a needle tower with it. And you're having to bring your clients along that story with you as you do that. So you have to hold on to their hands, and you have to make it extremely logical, even though what you're designing at the end is going to look like nothing that's ever existed before. Do they conflict? Yes. Owning your own business, do they conflict more? Yes. Because you have to, you have more of an ability and more of a need to be conscious and conscientious of the people who you are lucky enough to have as employees to work with you.
Another question. We've had a lot of speakers talk about business partners, the importance of complementary skills. So can you speak about your business partner, how you complement each other, and operate strategy, what it is?
Sure. One of the best parts about my business partner that we've gotten complimented on as we travel the world, meeting with different people, and this is another moment where we're in different parts of the world. My business partner and I both work out of New York City. My business partner is Turkish, he's also Muslim, and he's also a man. I am a Southern woman who was born in Starkville, Mississippi, and I'm a woman. So we are two totally different people. We have two totally different cultures. I would say what keeps us together and why the glue works so well is that we both have such an interest in the culture of making really good things. We are both extremely risk averse. We both spend a lot of money to make sure that our projects have a lot of quality control to them. We both care very much about our families and about living life and about laughing. And I'd said even earlier, humor was very important. And then I would say when it comes to skills, you know, each of us has just worked on so many different projects. We don't split up like a certain type of project. We both work on similar types of projects. But just the fact that we both have always worked on big buildings, and we've both worked on buildings of all price ranges, we both bring to the table, and we include each other on all correspondence so that if one of us knows the answer or has an idea about, hey, I think this would be a good solution for that problem, we email each other internally to allow us to all gain more. I think the first question kind of sounded like you were asking that I didn't go as far as I could have in my career. And then the second one was that how do I, by pushing our employees to follow their own dreams, is that juxtaposed with our business, or do I find it a good thing? First of all, the fact that I stopped at that star meant that that's when I off-roaded, but I have every intent of reaching higher than any architect before me, but I plan on doing it in a way that includes everyone. So I have, in no way do I feel like I have stopped learning or that I don't want to achieve more than ever achievable. I think I just don't want to do it in the Mad Men way. I want to do it in my own way. So I think I'm shooting higher than that other arrow. When it comes to our employees, we have one woman I was describing earlier today that is a ballerina, ballet dancer. She studies professionally, and while she works, it is everything my business partner and I can do to ask her to leave and to schedule time for her dance during the day. Why? It's because we know that if she takes that time to go out to do something that's important to her, she will come back and work more mentally charged. She will have a passion when she's doing, each of us has to do grunt work, when she's doing bathroom details and designing where the tile work is going and a urinal is being placed on the wall. Her mind will be thinking about something else. Hopefully she'll be listening to a Tchaikovsky song in the background. We want to make sure that people who we work with excel in everything they do and that they are well-rounded. And yes, it totally helps our bottom line.
All right, I think that's all the time we have. Thank you so much.
Thank you.